down on that one. They also had fears from their clients because anything to do with hidden images, advertisers are terrified of being accused of subliminal advertising. And so there's a kind of paranoia the minute hidden images come up. Anyway, so that experiment's on the back burner. Several other projects are in the pipeline. A friend of mine has invented a puzzle in England, a 9-piece geometrical puzzle, which is exceedingly hard to do. It took me hours and hours to solve it. It's got tens of thousands, millions of combinations, and there's 148 possible answers, but they're very hard to find. He's planning to market this in the near future, or in the more or less near future, and so we're setting up an experiment that would go with that if it is marketed. We'd monitor in other countries where it's marketed the rate at which people can solve it under standard conditions, and then measure at regular intervals in other countries before it's released there, to see whether millions of people or thousands or tens of thousands learning it in Britain affect these successes. It's like monitoring the ability of people to solve the Rubik cube if you'd got in right at the beginning. It's that kind of thing, only on a smaller scale. Anyway, that's one thing in the pipeline. The other thing is the 3 experiments which won the Terence Prize, which was awarded in June 1986 for tests of morphic resonance. All involved experiments on the ability of human beings to learn things that millions of people had learned before. Again, I won't go into these in detail because they're all written up in my new book, The Presence of the Past. Briefly, they involved the ability to learn or recognize words in languages unknown to the person in the written form. One involved Hebrew words written in Hebrew. The other involved Persian words written in Persian. These 2 experiments were very similar. They were done independently, one in the United States at Yale by Gary Schwartz, the other in Britain, by 2 people who both independently devised a very similar test to test for morphic resonance. Itself an interesting fact. And these tests showed the ability of people to learn things more readily if they were things that other people had learned before. The 3rd test was on Morse code. The main experiments that have been going on, apart from other ones planned in the human psychology realm, the ones that are actually going on right now are in the realms of chemistry and in fruit fly development. The experiment that's going on in Warwick University at this moment concerns protein folding. In my new book I discuss this. If proteins are unfolded, then it may be that they fold up again, which involves a complex morphogenetic process at the molecular level, which can be monitored using quite simple techniques. When they fold up again, they may be refolding in a way that they've not done in nature before. Especially, there are reasons why this would be so for certain particular enzymes. And so the more often they're refolded, they should learn how to do it, as it were, and the refolding process should take place measurably quicker. But we have an experiment going on to test for this, the refolding of enzymes and then repeated refolding to see if it happens quicker. I don't know the results yet. It's still going on, and I'm not sure whether it will give conclusive results or not within the summer, which is when the project ends. The other one's on fruit flies and the development of fruit flies, following up results that already suggest that when fruit flies are developed in response to an abnormal stimulus like ether or higher temperatures during pupation, that the abnormal flies, for example flies with extra veins in their wings, a certain proportion are produced by this stress from the environment. But the more flies that have been exposed to the stress, the more that have become abnormal, the greater the abnormal response is when fresh ones are put into this stress. This has already been found, and it looks very much like a morphogenetic morphic resonance effect. And some more experiments are going on to test the earlier results that showed this result to be the case. Again, those experiments are about halfway through at the moment. So these are some of the things that are going on to test the theory. I should perhaps mention one attempt to refute the theory that's been made and recently published in the Skeptical Inquirer. I don't know how many people here are readers of the Sceptical Inquirer, perhaps rather few. The Sceptical Inquirer, as you may know, is the house journal of PsyCop, the debunking organisation, and the one that's most famous for James Randi being among its activists. And this was published, it was a paper by Francisco Varela, who claimed to have refuted the hypothesis of formative causation. And the experiment that he'd done involved programming a desktop computer to carry out a particular operation, measure the time it took to do it, and then repeat this operation millions of times, and then measuring the rate of it. And he found that the computer didn't do it any quicker. So he concluded that this refuted the hypothesis of formative causation, and he first wrote this paper in 1983 and sent it to me, and suggested we had a public discussion on this, which I agreed to. So we had 2 or 3 exchanges, and the idea was to publish the papers together. I argued in my first exchange that it didn't test the theory because the theory only applies to indeterminate quantum systems which contain enough indeterminacy for these probabilistic fields to get a grip on it, whereas computers are completely determinate in their functioning. There's nothing that the fields could do. Secondly, that computers are not self-organizing systems in the same sense that morphogenetic systems in cells, crystals, molecules, and atoms are. Rather, the program that's going on is not something that's created itself, but rather something which Varela had thought up and put inside the machine. There was nothing self-organizing about that. And therefore, this wasn't a test of the theory. Anyway, Varela didn't agree, and said that I couldn't maintain that living organisms were not machines like computers, because both organisms and machines were machines, and that there was no difference in principle between computers and living organisms, because they were all machines. So we got into this kind of argument, and I said I thought that was rubbish and that it wasn't like that at all, and so on. Anyway, what happened then was that a physicist, the late Professor Michael Ovenden of the University of British Columbia, who was one of the judges of the Tarrytown competition, read Varela's paper, which was entered for the competition, and all 4 judges rejected as being a valid test of the theory. He pointed out to me that it didn't test the theory because the way computers work is that every microsecond or so there's a pulse, and the instructions are carried out pulse-wise. So a program with 30 steps in would take 30 microseconds, because each step is pulsed by this internal clock. Well, roughly speaking, that seems to be what's going on in the computer. Varela's program of 30 steps took 30 microseconds for his computer to do. It's a computer that has a microsecond clock. And after millions of repetitions, it still took 30 microseconds. Well, all this shows is that the clock that pulses the things in the computer was pulsing the instructions at exactly the rate that the computer has to pulse them at, namely 1 microsecond. And so it took 30 microseconds to run through these instructions. Even if the silicon chips had responded quicker to the pulses, then it wouldn't have shown up in this experiment, because they would still have had to happen every microsecond. Anyway, this error in the basis of the experiment was pointed out to him. Anyway, he published the original paper, and I've now written a reply in the Sceptical Inquirer pointing out these issues. But when I sent this into the editor of the Sceptical Inquirer, he wrote back to me saying that my reply probably wouldn't come out till the winter number, since the letters section of the fall number was already full of letters from other people pointing out the same error. So that's the status of the refutation debate at the moment, and you'll be able to see these various things in the forthcoming next 2 issues of the Sceptical Inquirer, should you ever see it around. There are quite a number of projects being planned in the realms of chemistry and developmental biology and experimental psychology. Some funding has become available for morphic resonance research, which is why these projects are going on right now, owing to the generosity of 3 or 4 individuals, and then smaller subscriptions through the Fund for Morphic Resonance.